Okay. One comment I would make is I've certainly heard from affordable housing advocates around the state that there are still AMIs that are not being served and properties that need to be rehabilitated because the current tax credit just doesn't meet, say, some of the most challenged properties and income brackets around the state. And that is something I do hope that our treasurer will be able to explore as we move forward this conversation. The final question I have has to do with certification. Wanted to ask, is there any cost to our state in allowing these credits to be certificated? I think the idea of not allowing our hard-earned California dollars go to the feds and really trying to capture that ourselves makes a lot of sense, but could you address that?
I'll do my best to. The preliminary research we've done on other programs, other states and other programs that have certificated the credits, is that there's not a significant increase in cost. We'd have to talk to the Treasurer's office if they would be the implementing agency, which I think would make sense. But I don't think it would cost them any more staff work beyond an initial staffing up and training to understand how to use it. But long term, I don't think it would cost any more to have a certificated credit than an allocated credit. And there could even be some potential savings because it's a potentially simpler mechanism.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you. Just a couple quick follow-up questions. With respect to the first proposal that you mentioned, i.e. to raise the 13% to 50%, how is that done logistically, or where is it going to be done?
It would need to be done in Revenue and Taxation Code, Section 17058.
Okay. Got it.
And there is a current 13% mentioned there, and it's not an entirely simple fix to make because it reoccurs in several places, but we've been consulting with some tax attorneys who believe it's very doable with the legislature's direction, of course.
Got it. Now, with respect to the certificated idea, is that similar to a voucher that could be sold by, let's say, by the recipient to, let's say, nonprofit organizations and entities? Would it?
It's different in that it's specifically designed to offset tax liability, dollar for dollar tax liability. So I'm not aware of any vouchers that work like that. It still really functions. It is a certificated tax credit. So my research has shown that it's really changing the delivery mechanism. We're not fundamentally changing the thing itself, the tax credit.
Would you also propose a time limitation on the duration during which we could sell, or do you kind of put a cap on that?
Well, there's already a time limitation on the state credit that you've created of maximum of 4 years. It tends to be used in 2, 3, sometimes 4. So this would follow the same timeline to avoid anyone claiming that it was going to increase the state's costs by bringing forward the value of out years. So the simplistic proposal would be to keep it in the same time frame as the current state credit.
Got it. Thank you. We may have further questions as we go, but let's hear from Mr. Calavita, who is the Professor Emeritus with the graduate program in city planning at San Diego State University. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Again, my name is Nico Calavita, and I've been working on inclusionary housing and commercial linkage fees for many, many years. And during the past few years, I've become much interested in ways in which, through market-based approaches, we can extract more affordable housing and community benefits from the development process. So that's in a nutshell is what my presentation is about. And it's especially recapturing land value that we could utilize to gain community benefits. So here is a very simplified scheme of how government actions, such as the building of infrastructure in public facilities or through rezoning process or land use changes, we increase the value of land. In the case of infrastructure and public facilities, we have a mechanism which is special assessment financing, which has been around for about 40 years. And I will not be talking about that. I just want to point out that there is a book that came out last year that addresses especially how, through the special assessment finance, we could finance mass transit. But what I'm interested in is how plan changes and upzoning can, by increasing the value of the land, will provide opportunity to recapture some of those increases for community benefits. And how do we do that? Well, it can be done in two ways. The first way is through negotiations, and the other one is through a plan-based plan. What kind of community benefits are we talking about? This list is taken from the city of Santa Monica. As you can see, affordable housing, workforce housing is on top of the list, as it is the case in most of the localities. And so it's not only about affordable housing, but also for community development as well. So how does it work economically? Well, the landowner who would have gained an increase in the price of the land will gain less because the developer will not be able to pay as much for the land as before, because now he has to pay for the community benefits. Mm-hmm. So there is a reduction in the amount of profit that the landowner will make. The developer benefits because of the improvement in community facilities, and of course the community as well benefits because of the amenities provided. In order to work, it needs to be located in an area where the market is strong or at least stable. And what is extremely important is that the value of both the increases in the value of the land or in the value of the development and the cost of the amenities be calculated through a financial analysis. That becomes the basis through which then a political decision can be made, but that is an essential starting point for political bartering. I'm going to very quickly present two different approaches. One is based on negotiations in the state of California. It would be development agreements. And the slide shows what the disadvantages of a negotiation process would be and what the advantages would be. And here's an example of the city of Santa Monica. A few years ago, they prepared a land use and circulation element, so it is based on a plan. But the idea is that depending on how much height and FARs a developer gets, then that developer will provide additional benefits. Tier 3, which is the tier where the most height is possible, and the city chose to negotiate it with the developers. Negotiation and agreements are particularly difficult and expensive in time and money to do. So for Tier 2, the city now is developing a system whereas a developer choosing to increase the density from Tier 1 to Tier 2 will have a fixed amount, which is, for now, is 14% over the base fees attached to Tier 1. The plan-based approach relates to when a city prepares a specific plan, community plans as they're called in San Diego. In this particular case, there is a great deal of transparency and accountability, etc. And also the area-wide EIRs was mentioned by a presenter earlier, which also provides additional savings for developers. In this particular case, it minimizes potential extraction, and the Palmer decision for inclusionary housing applies in that particular case. Here are some examples. One is in San Diego, in downtown San Diego, where in 2007 the city established a FAR payment bonus program, basically FAR for sale. The city would allow for an increase in FARs of 1 to 2 in particular areas of the city, and the cost per square foot was $15, which was half of what economic analysis established was possible. This speaks to the political process. Again, economic analysis can show what can be achieved, what is feasible without rendering a particular project unfeasible, but the political process led to a half of that particular economically feasible fee. I thought these slides would be of interest to state legislators to show some of the consequences of eliminating redevelopment. That is to say, localities then struggle to find additional or different sources of revenue. In this particular case, the FAR acquisition program was expanded in order to ensure financing for open space and parks. And the state density bonus program can be added on top of the various payment incentive bonus programs. So in downtown San Diego, the maximum FAR is 26, which is quite high. And on top of what can be achieved through the base density, the deficit bonuses, the density bonus program is 2.1. Another example is the Eastern Neighborhood Plan in San Francisco. And I don't have time to get into the details of how the plan was developed, but the point is that, again, a tier system which ties increased densities to additional fees was established. So the tier 1 is where you have a minimum increase in height in FAR, and tier 3 where you have increase of 29 feet or more. And as you can see, the amount of fees increases as the amount of density is also increased. So, caveat. In order for value capture to work, the base density has to be low. In areas in which the density has already been given away, it is impossible to establish community benefits. Oakland has done that. A few years ago, the upzone downtown in the Lake Merritt area and Chinatown, and now the plans are being updated. There is a claim on the part of the communities there to obtain community benefits, but there are no community benefits to be gained through this particular approach. Mm-hmm. So the point is for localities not to upzone without community benefits. And the last point I want to make has to do with the housing element. When I give this presentation, many times, especially politicians, they would ask me, well, the state asks us to upzone land in order for us to meet the requirements, to have our housing element approved. But you're telling us that we should not do that without a community benefit. So in the case of the housing element, to affordable housing to be provided. Because here we have a contradiction. If you upzone the land, the value of the land is going to increase. That land is supposed to be reserved for affordable housing. So you have this contradiction that you are upzoning that land without designating for affordable housing, but by doing so, the value of the land is going to increase. Mm-hmm. So in a way, by cities upzoning the land, they're making it more difficult for affordable housing developers or even for market developers to provide affordable housing through inclusionary housing. So this is a conundrum and it needs to be addressed. And I would like to just point out that this is an issue that needs to be resolved before we expand on value capture.
Got it. Thank you. Questions? Mr. Chu, go ahead.
This is a very interesting presentation, and certainly I think there are a lot of ideas here that I could support. One of the things that we've seen in the Bay Area is a number of cities and communities that would invite, say, a company to create a new campus, 5,000 or 10,000 new workers, without any requirement that housing be built nearby, which not only creates significant traffic congestion issues, but it puts enormous market pressure on housing in the nearby cities, including San Francisco and San Jose and Oakland, where there is housing. So you have a situation where there are communities that are not asking for these community benefits. And is it your suggestion that to get at that, we ought to consider state rules that require a certain level of community benefit in those circumstances?
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. That was something I didn't dare to point out.
That's why I asked.
But and this would address not only inclusionary housing, but also commercial linkage fees. So that when I was talking about something needs to be done about the housing element, I was really thinking about some mechanism similar to what you're proposing, whereas a locality in designating areas for higher densities or for additional office space, that would come with particular requirements. Mm-hmm. And it could be a dual system in the sense that a city which already has inclusionary housing, then it could have inclusionary housing plus. That is to say, a city which will increase, upzone a particular piece of land or change land use designation, then in that particular case, the requirements for inclusionary housing or commercial linkage fees could be increased.
I think the challenge now, as I alluded to before, is it is typically up to every local community to decide what sort of community benefits they want to exact. And in many circumstances, I think every city talks about a commitment to smart growth, but may not necessarily be thinking about those job housing linkages and how important that is and how that impacts other parts of a region.
Smart growth will lead to higher land prices. And by trying to create compact development, one of the consequences is a tremendous increase in land prices. So this particular approach where you try to gain some of the increases of the land cost increases, I think is due.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of follow-up questions, if I may follow up with Ms. Brooks. I think you mentioned that there are several states that have had quite a bit of successes in recording fee legislation. For those states, what were some of the opposition factors, and how does a state, let's say California, overcome those obstacles?
Well, I don't think this will be any surprise. When you identify a potential dedicated revenue source to commit to a trust fund, there's always somebody sitting on the other side of the table that thinks that's their money. So with any revenue source, I won't pretend that it's easy. There is opposition. And the biggest one, frankly, for the document recording fees have been the county clerks themselves. So they're different, and it depends, of course, in each state. It differs a little bit in terms of not only how the fees collected, but what the responsibility of the county clerks are. And so when it is what typically happens is the document recording fee is increased, and that increased revenue goes into the trust fund. There are times where they take a portion of that increase and offer it to the clerks for the administrative additional responsibility that they have for tracking it. Sometimes the clerks stay quiet about it, and sometimes they're actually quite vocal. But other than that, there's been no particular opposition to. I mean, it's always somebody who's associated with the revenue source itself. Oh. Does that make sense?
Yes, and so if I understand correctly, the main opposition came from the recorder themselves, but not so much from other organizations such as the realtors. Did the realtors have any issues with that issue?
Realtors have in some states, but not all. So the Realtors Association are typically members of the National Association, which has a policy, in fact, to oppose any shifts in real estate transfer taxes. So they definitely take that on as an issue, but they have also done the same with the document recording fee in some instances. So when it was talked about previously in California, the realtors, frankly, were quite adamant about that.
I'm sorry if I may just, but isn't it true that in Florida, after initial opposition, the realtors did end up supporting the transfer tax to fund the trust fund?
They have been a very, very strong advocate in Florida for what their dedicated revenue source is actually a real estate transfer tax. And they've been part of what's called the Sadowski Coalition in Florida and been very strong advocates for that trust fund. Alabama right now is looking at a document recording fee, and the Birmingham Realtors Association come out in support of it. Illinois, when they created their housing trust fund, after they demonstrated what the housing trust fund could achieve, realtors have actually come out and said this is benefiting our industry. It's not causing us problems because the housing trust fund is actually addressing a part of the housing need that we cannot.
Were they imposing a flat fee as opposed to, let's say, per document fee? Do you remember, or do you know? Were the other states imposing a flat fee for, let's say, per transaction, or was it based on per document fee?
On the document recording fee, it's a flat fee, right?
So,
Well, and maybe per page, so it may differ depending on the type of document. The transfer tax is a percentage of value, so those differ. Right.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And just a follow-up question for Mr. Schwartz. This is the same question that I raised earlier about the increase from 13% to the 50% threshold. Are there any downsides to doing that at all?
If you were to not increase the total amount of credit, that is, you were to just leave the current $94 million adjusted credit amount of state credit, and then to increase the credit amount by more than 3.5 times, the users of the existing credit would run out of credit. We would have some chaos in the program. It only works if you substantially increase the amount of the credit and at the same time increase the credit percentage. It would be problematic to increase the credit percentage without. Yes.
So it's kind of.
Because the credit right now is being fully subscribed, even with in its reduced value form. In fact, it was oversubscribed in 2014.
And Proposal 1 is basically mutually exclusive of Proposal 2, then, I take it?
No, actually, I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. We think they work very well together. Not only would you get the boost that I described in the first proposal, but you'd get a 40% across-the-board increase in the value of that credit. And you could then look at perhaps changing the 50% credit rate and go down slightly, which would let it go much further, or you could do other things with that if we didn't have to pay federal taxes on our state low-income housing tax credit.
Got it. Great, thank you. If there are no other questions, I want to thank the panel for your presentation. You've been very helpful. Thank you. That brings us to the final segment of our program, which is public comment. At this time, I'd like to invite to the podium members of the public who would like to make comments. Come on up. You can use that mic over there.
Holly Fermini with Platinum Advisors on behalf of Habitat for Humanity California. I just want to thank you for doing this informational hearing. We really appreciate it, especially the first panel. I think there was a lot of focus on working families and that there's not a lot of state programs or a lot of discussion, the solutions related to working families. But we are the #1 developer providing home ownership opportunities for working families in California throughout the country. And we just hope that home ownership, I think Ms. Brooks' presentation was wonderful about the need for both rental and for sale opportunities be treated equally during the process, that there's a demand for both, and we hope that the housing packages that the legislature will be considering will include home ownership opportunities as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And go ahead.
Michael Lane with the Nonprofit Housing Association, Northern California. Appreciate the hearing today and all your work to prepare this and the presentations that were made. And just wanted to put on the record, we also actually have a very robust housing program in the state that we didn't talk about today. It's over a $5 billion program, and that's called a tax expenditure program for a mortgage interest deduction. If you're a higher income person, you own a home and you have a large mortgage, you get to deduct that interest. And it costs the state over $5 billion a year, so we're actually subsidizing higher income people for their housing. And we don't have anything like that for lower income people at this point. So I think that's the proposal we're bringing to you. Don't meet that $5 billion cost, but I think they're significant and would help lower income people. So we encourage you to look at that package that the speakers brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Good morning. Rob Wiener with California Coalition for Rural Housing. I just wanted to mention that not to forget the areas of the state, rural, suburban, interior parts of the state, for which some of these programs don't really work that well, such as the cap-and-trade program. So we need to look at funding sources that will provide affordable housing opportunities, not just in the very expensive coastal areas, but also in the Central Valley, the Inland Empire, and the more rural parts of the state. And secondly, I would also urge you to think about a housing bond in 2016. I know that's a political lift, but it will have been 10 years since our last housing bond in 2006. Previous to 2006, we had a housing bond in 2002, so we only waited 4 years. That's a long time to go without a housing bond. We've had 6 housing bonds since 1988, 5 of which have been passed by the voters. And it is a way to build a strong coalition around affordable housing, and I would ask that the legislature, put that on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other comments, I'd like to thank every one of you for being here, and thank you for your input, particularly to the presenters who made wait to come on up and make your presentation. So thank you very much, and that concludes our meeting.